All right, everybody. As a former teacher, of course, teaching concepts is one of the things that I want to teach you within six-figure systems. However, I do not want you to do what I'm about to do, which is douse you in information. It's going to be a lot today, so just bear with me, and I will explain so much more on our coaching calls, and you can ask any questions you want within any of the forums that we have. So, the breakdown, we're going to talk about how you can expand on some concepts that are within your pillars. Then you are going to talk about, if I would love for you to do a webinar while we're actually within the next 6 months, so you get experience while you're in this container. I can look over your slides, I can look over your emails, I can look over all of that stuff for you, bring them to the coaching call and we can talk through it. That can be a full session. And I would love for you to just have that experience of doing that once, along with actually being able to have time to do outreach beforehand. So if you want to choose a date and time, today would be great. And then we're going to talk about how to do an outline. Some things that I think are great in a webinar, and we're going to think about how to use this to really talk about your program. Now within this, when we're thinking about these lead generators, when we talked about doing the marketing and stuff, a great way to break the ice could be hey, it's so good to see you. Also, after you've talked with them for a while, hopefully they're going to be seeing more of your posts and things like that, and we're going to be posting a fair amount before the webinar. However, you might be hey, by the way, just so you know, I am doing this webinar. It sounds like we've been talking about burnout. The webinar is on burnout. Would this be something you would want to do? It's next Friday at 2. Would you like to come? Something like that, and they can be oh, I'm busy, and you're no worries, I'll see you at the next one. But it's just a great way to break the ice, and I include a lot of the prompts and stuff like that there on this slide. So, the thing that I found when you are teaching concepts, sometimes there's a lot of overwhelm when you give too much away at once. And so we're going to talk about how to not give so much away. And a lot of times when people, of course, you're not a teacher, most of you, and so there might be a little bit of lack of specificity, and you might be okay, so when you were, it's let me, a perfect example is a stress one. It's you're stressed because of the way you think about it. And people are wait, no, I'm not. I'm stressed because my boss sucks. And you're that's where you'll miss people if you don't explain the pieces in between. And so that's what we're going to be clear about moving forward. Now within this, the reason why we do this is because you get really excited. You're oh, and I did this at the beginning. I tried to teach the model, the thing that I spent a whole 30 minutes or something talking to you guys about just now. I tried to do that in one post. I was so excited. I was oh my God, this changed my life. This is awesome. And I really wanted to give them everything I could to help them. The other thing is, the reason why we do that is I also, probably a piece of me wanted to prove myself. Be oh, look at how knowledgeable I am. I know that I'm a good coach. I can prove to you that I'm a good coach. And when you do that, it's not from a place of believing you're in demand. You're not in that belief triad. You're not believing that there are thousands of people who want what you have to serve and offer them. So you want to make sure that you are getting back in that belief triad if you're feeling the excitement and overcompensation. Now within this, why teaching concepts is so important and why it's, again, when we talked about the marketing funnel, it is actually a really important piece of your marketing funnel. So it is within the marketing piece. But it gives you a lot of credibility. When you are working with your audience, you want to it shows that you know what you're talking about. So you're planting seeds hey, if you work with me, this is just what you get in an hour. This is what you could get over the next 6 months. It's a lot more valuable to them. And it's kind of showing them, hey, I'm credible. This is worthy of your time and funds. The next thing is you want to give people value ahead of time. You want to get people free help ahead of time, and then they're going to be thrilled. Imagine, my goal is that by using my testimonial template, which is not a presentation, but by giving people a testimonial template, what I notice is I want people to be like, oh my gosh, I can get way more people in my business just because I signed up for this one thing with Megan. I would love for them to just like be like super delighted. And then if they're thinking that this free thing is awesome, imagine how amazing the paid thing would be. If what I'm getting for free is awesome, paid will probably be phenomenal. And then you also want to expand your reach. Remember, we are looking to make sure that your audience is growing. So there are going to be people that come and go all the time, but you want to make sure that you are not necessarily just talking to your current people. You want to make sure you're bringing in new people. And if you think about every single person that you know knows a wedding full of people, that gives you an idea and a perspective for like how many people you could possibly help if they're seeing what you do and like what you do. So the way that I like to teach this is when you are thinking about your pillars, usually the way that you start is you want to break it down into subtopics that are usually something that you've learned from somebody else. When you are first starting your business, it's probably going to be directly learned from somebody else. And I give you full permission, whenever you learn in this program, feel free to teach. Like, it's like you're free. This is my intellectual property, and I've decided because you've invested in it, you can share it as well. For me, I know that I'm already the way I deliver it's going to be different and bring in my people, and the way you deliver it's going to be different and bring in your people. So it's going to be good either way. The next thing I want to mention is like you'll have each of the pillars and you'll have like things that are like things you've directly learned. So that'll be like Monday Hour 1. Monday Hour 1, which is the 6th pillar, directly learned from the Life Coach School. It's Brooke Castillo's intellectual property. However, as you go on and you teach your clients and you're working with your clients, you'll come up with variations of things that you've heard on certifications, books, podcasts, and trainings, and you'll be able to put your own spin on it. So for me, that was like Monday Hour 1, I translated to Monthly Hour 1, and you'll be learning about that in, I think, the 12th week when we talk about annual planning. Then, last but not least, then you can completely try something that is, when you are developing and you're like working with people, you're going to come up with your own stuff. Like this concept breakdown spreadsheet, totally my own. No one has ever showed me this. This is something that is totally unique to me. The weekly tracker to track your progress with the graph, all me. So you're going to get those subtopics and subcategories as you grow. The way I like to think about subtopics, that's a topic for an entire webinar. So like when I talk about the style of marketing, I could do a whole presentation on cold, hot, and warm leads and how the style and the way that you want to diversify your posting so you can reach a bigger audience. That is something that I would do as a full webinar. Then for the subcategories, I break down one of the subtopics, so like style of marketing, into another thing that's like cold, warm, and hot leads. And so I could do a post that's just about cold leads to explain that. So again, pillars, big overarching concepts and topics. Subtopic is something that would take a full hour to teach. Subcategories, a post. So when you are planning a webinar, what you want to do is you want to pick a subcategory and just go for it. It's going to be messy, and I promise at least you got me to like cheer you on while you do it. I remember for the first webinar I did, my mom and my partner came, and then the second webinar that I did, I didn't even tell them about it and nobody came. And I marketed that first webinar for 5 weeks when I just left teaching, and it was absolutely devastating to have no one join. But that's what it takes. Sometimes you just have to have nobody join in order to learn how to do it better. Now I know that you only market it the week before, so I didn't spend 5 weeks just building interest. The times that I've chosen are Wednesdays at 7 some of the time for this launch. For the mastermind, I'm doing Monday at 7, but that is just my choice for a time of day. And I feel like that would be you just have to choose a time that works for you and trust that your people are going to come. So once you've got the date and the time, I like to decide my dates a month in advance because you guessed it, when I'm doing my marketing calendar, I want to about the two most aligned pillars to that topic. I want to talk about one of them the week before and one of them the week of, so that I'm planning my marketing in advance. Then step 2, make sure the marketing aligns. Step 3 is you want to create posts the week before, just the week before, seeding the webinar. Seeding is like planting seeds with the humans. I mean, like, hey, hello, I would like for you to come. And you write those posts a month in advance, but you don't need to post them you don't need to post them until a week in advance. Then what I like to do is I like to take a look at my nurture list and reach out to everybody. I want to make sure that I've had conversations with these people, and like a lot of conversation in a perfect world before we actually do the webinar. Instead of just being like, hey, so good to talk to you again, come to my webinar. Which I did a ton, and it's still okay. It's just the way that I would show up as my highest CEO self is like, I can see myself reaching out to people way before that. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's okay. And then you're going to fill out the script and make worksheets to go along. So that's like the next piece. And I'll look through all this stuff for you when we're working together. So then a week before, there's a protocol. This is when you want to actually be making the graphics. You want to be changing the pop-up on your link tree or on your website. If you have a website, you want to be talking about this webinar. And then I have the example of what I have on there. And then you want to actually make either like a Facebook event or a LinkedIn event. Still to this day, even though I've made a ton of money for my Facebook event, because it's not necessarily where my ideal clients currently are hanging out, I still get like only 3 people to come. And that is fine. Then I want to make sure that my emails are scheduled. There's going to be one for the week prior that will be going out. The Sunday before this week, upcoming, an hour before the webinar, and then 30 minutes into the presentation, along with 2 more follow-up emails for afterwards. So you're going to have 6 emails that are going to be scheduled and ready to go, so you don't psych yourself out and you're like, oh my god, I'm sending 6 emails, it's a lot. And I'm going to give you the exact words that I use in each of those emails. You're also going to change your link tree, message everyone from the list, hey, webinar coming up, and then add everyone to the email. So from there, then you're going to present the webinar, and I'll talk about how to do that. But I also want you to know that you're going to do, I would recommend doing more webinars. Like, the reason why I can get up here and talk about this, and I've been talking about this for like, we've been filming for a while today, but the reason why is because I have had a ton of time presenting and sharing my topics that I can just like look at a page and I can spill out information. That's a skill that you want to develop as your business scales to 6 and multiple 6 figures, and it helps you create a credible, it helps you give speaking experience. So afterwards, you're going to evaluate it, and I've got an evaluation for you. Again, it's going to be like 5 things that went well, what worked, what needs improvement, and what can you do differently. I like to give away coaching sessions at the end for anyone who signed up, so that could be something fun that you could do. And I like to actually be like, hey, you won! And I use like this wheel of names. I'm like, you won! Here's the link for your free coaching call. And then change the pop-up on my website back to the original. Change the webinar registration to either the next webinar if you're really planning that out far in advance, or just take it off your page if it's on your website. Message everyone who came and be like, hey, thanks for coming. Is there anything else I can help you with? And then, of course, sending those free sessions. So, within the outline, how do you actually do a webinar? Very simple. 3 steps. You introduce them. You have the problem, why they're there. You have the solution, and how to work with you. That's it, guys. So it's like, when you're doing the webinar, it is actually so much simpler than so many people actually make it out to be. And again, I'm going to be able to look through your slides with you on our coaching calls. So feel free to bring whatever you have. But this next slide is what the webinar actually looks like, the outline. So within the template, you're going to have the intro talking about that. And then you're going to have the body, and we'll talk about like how to break it down, whatever your pillar is, how to break it down into 3 steps. And then you'll talk about how to sell, to be like, okay, this is over, and then you're going to talk about your program. Remember with the pillars at the very beginning of this training, that subtopic is a part of a bigger pillar. So if I were to talk and do a whole post about marketing, I'd be like, or about the style of marketing, I could do a whole webinar about just like the different styles of marketing. I'd be like, the different styles of marketing are important, but I have so much more I want to teach you about marketing. And then I have so much more I want to teach you about all of business. I want to teach you about sales, presenting, planning, managing. Sign up here to work with me. A consult will look like this, and it'll be very clear. And I've got lots of examples for you guys. The next thing you want to do is make an email. Again, this is the email. I'm including the exact words I say. Hey, you're in. These are other resources until then. And then that person is on your email list, which is very valuable. Next, you're going to send them the email that says 3 days before, or I like to do it the Sunday before, and I'm like, hey, this week is the webinar. Remember, put it on your calendar. It's happening. Then the next email is all about, okay, the email, this is when you do it an hour before, and you're like, hey, just so you know what to expect, here's the Zoom link. Here, if you have a worksheet that you want to follow along, you can add that. And if you decide to book a consult, this is also here. If you have any questions, reply. And that's what you want to spend an hour before your webinar to actually be practicing this. The next one is 30 minutes into the webinar, you actually want to have an email about how to book a consult with you. That's why we have the QR codes in the presentation, and you want to be able to be like, okay, by the way, you guys are probably watching this on a computer. If you are, you should have just gotten an email, and when you're talking about the consultation process, you can be like, the link is in here, the link is in your inbox, or you can scan this QR code to sign up for a call. Again, you want to, anyone that you get an email from, you want to add to that outreach tracker. You want to make sure that these people are now warm leads. If they're a random person that you've never met before, now we want to talk to them. We want to find out a little bit more about them. If they gave you their email them back. If they signed up from Instagram, talk to them on Instagram. If they signed up on Facebook, talk to them on Facebook. You get the picture. So these are just helpful pieces of technology that you can follow along with this. So there's this thing called a light box. A light box is a pop-up. So that can be something that you can utilize. The QR code, like I have been sharing about, is so helpful because people can actually book a consult on the call with you. There's also the Slido. So the Slido is sharing about that's a piece of technology that you can use, and people can actually interact on your slideshow. When you're doing the slideshow, they can scan a QR code, get familiar with scanning QR codes, so if they want to book a consult, you are good, and you can make sure that it shows up at the top of your slides. The reason why this looks so nice, this slideshow, is because I use something called Slides Go, and that is actually a template where I get all of my slideshows from, and you can save it to your Google account and then change out the Google Slides. I would recommend using Google Slides because if you post the presentation to your website, what happens is if you make edits, as I change my presentations, the presentation automatically changes. Instead of you having to if it's a PowerPoint, which is something that doesn't save automatically, you have to take down the old presentation, add the new presentation anytime you change it, and that can just be a lot of work. The other thing is there are ways that you can do free email lists. MailChimp is one of them. You can look up different services. I use it, Flowdesk, which is a little fancier, but it is not necessary. And last but not least, creating an email signature is a really great thing. It's just a way that you can be like, hey, here's who I am. I'm Megan Wing. I'm a life and business coach. This is what I do. And you can book a consult straight from there. So again, like I mentioned, this is an example of Slido. If you want to see what that looks like, you can scan it, and then if you click to the next slide, you could have seen the things that I think, well, at least when we do that in the presentation, I'll show you what it looks like so that you can see the graphs that actually change in real time. So you just click through those. And if you want to see any of my old presentations, I have them all up. So you can see how much my presentations have changed, and you can click on webinars, and that's a great thing to utilize. The other thing is, if you are part of the mastermind, the way I did my 6-figure systems interest webinar, which I'm changing the title of and figuring it out for this next launch, I actually did a consult. It was almost like an exact consult on the webinar. So I was like, what are your problems? And then with the Slido, I was like, what's your problem with marketing? How confident do you feel about marketing on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And people were voting in real time. And I was like, why? Just reflect on that privately. Where would you want to be 6 months from now? Fun fact, I can help you with that. And that was kind of one of the ways that I was able to use a webinar to launch a product. Then afterwards, like I mentioned, you want to evaluate, say what wins, what worked, what could be improved, what can you do differently. If it's a webinar you want to present again, make the changes now, you will forget. And the other thing I want to let you know is I would present it multiple times to maybe different groups to get experience, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at presenting. And I just want to thank you guys for being incredible. We have one more module with the essentials, and then we are going to get into the additional systems. So you guys are doing awesome. I'm so proud of you. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the last module.